Somewhere in Queens, a 15-year-old is swinging through freezing rain at midnight, and tonight, something from a completely different universe is about to end up inside of him. A fragment of Ryuman Sukuna, the most dangerous cursed spirit in human history. Yuji Itadori survived eating one of those fingers because his body was built for it. Generations of dark sorcery made him a cage. But Peter Parker wasn't. He has no idea what he just swallowed. Today, we're gonna find out what that will cost him. We place this divergence slowly after the events of Spider-Man Homecoming. Peter's around 15. He recently turned down Tony's offer. He's back in Queens, still figuring out what kind of hero he actually wants to be. The artifact arrives in New York through a series of careless mistakes. A corrupt jujutsu sorcerer in Japan's underground secured one of the 20 fingers during an illegal transfer. The higher-ups were too busy with internal political struggles to notice the gap in the security grid. The sorcerer slipped through the cracks. He knew they'd execute him the second they found out, so he smuggled the finger onto a cargo ship bound for the United States. Cursed energy scrambles over open ocean water, which meant traditional monitoring systems couldn't track the object once it left Japanese jurisdiction. The American criminals receiving the shipment only cared about acquiring something rare and ancient. To them, the finger was just another artifact that eccentric billionaires and corrupt collectors pay millions to own. They noticed it emitted a strange frequency on their scanning equipment, which only drove the price up. They viewed it as dangerous purely because of its price tag, remaining completely oblivious to its true nature. Now, in this timeline, the JJK universe and the MCU take place in the same place. Peter's nearby because of a police scanner tip. He spent the evening swinging through the freezing rain, bored, waiting for something to happen. The scanners stay quiet for hours until it's scrambled. Frantic transmission mentions a high-stakes exchange at Brooklyn Navy Yard. He swings down and webs the smuggler to a shipping container. The smuggler's panic sparks a shootout between the buyers and the sellers. A stray bullet shatters the wooden box containing the artifact. The immediate release of concentrated cursed energy acts like a beacon in the night. A cursed spirit manifests from the shadows, drawn to the exposed finger. It's a grotesque amalgamation of twisted limbs and teeth. Peter can't see it. He perceives only shipping containers denting and civilians flying backwards through the air as if they've been hit by an invisible truck. The unseen entity tears through the docks. It rips steel doors off their hinges and tosses armed men into the freezing water as if they're weightless. The criminals fire their weapons blindly into the dark. Their bullets pass right through the spirit, hitting nothing but concrete. Peter relies entirely on his spider sense. It reacts every time the invisible monster moves, giving them the shape of the threat even if his eyes can't comprehend the source. He tries to fight back. He throws a punch at the empty space where his instincts tell him the monster is standing. His fist passes straight through it. Without cursed energy, his physical attacks mean nothing. The spirit grabs a civilian. Peter gets pinned under a crushed shipping container, struggling to lift the metal off his back. He notices the preserved, mummified finger rolling across the pavement. His spider sense screams at him, treating the finger as a threat. He puts the timeline together fast. The monster appeared the exact moment the box broke. The finger must be the source. In a desperate decision to keep it away from the rampaging spirit, Peter shoots a web, yanks the finger into his hand, and swallows it whole. Pure instinct. He's hoping to conceal the artifact from the monster. He has no idea he just consumed a fragment of Sukuna himself. But before we can understand what that means for Peter, we have to understand why it should have killed him. When Yuji Itadori ate the finger, he survived because his body was specifically built to be a vessel. Kinjaku engineered his lineage across generations precisely for that purpose. The biology was already there. Peter Parker has none of that. The moment the finger slides down his throat, a surge of foreign energy erupts inside of him. For a normal human, consuming a cursed object causes immense physical trauma and instant death. Peter collapses on the docks. Black markings flash across his skin. Two extra eyes open beneath his own. Sukuna looks out at the New York skyline. He smiles, ready to massacre the dock workers and explore the strange new environment. He tries to lift Peter's arm to summon a cursed technique, but the muscles refuse to move. Peter's body survives the connection because the spider bite changed more than his strength and his reflexes. It changed his biology at a level that creates an unusual compatibility, something nobody, including Peter, could have predicted. His body doesn't just accept the energy, it resists it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Peter forces the extra eyes shut, locking Sukuna away before the demon can take his first step in the real world. Peter wakes up gasping on the cold pavement. The cursed spirit is gone, exorcised by the shockwave of Sukuna's brief manifestation. The surviving dock workers run for their lives. Peter lies there in the freezing rain, staring up at the dock lights. He's alive, but something is already scratching at the walls inside of his head, and it is patient, furious, and very, very old. The first night, Peter can almost convince himself is just the adrenaline. His spider senses never worked like this before. A low, constant vibration at the base of his skull, not spiking towards any specific threat, just humming. It's quiet enough that he can talk himself out of it. He's exhausted. He's coming down from the fight. It'll pass. By the third night, he can't sleep. The hum doesn't stop. It's there when he closes his eyes, and there when he opens them. A biological alarm that his own body is running because something dangerous shares it with him. He sits in his bedroom at 3 in the morning, holding his head in his hands, trying not to let Aunt May hear him through the walls. He starts avoiding her, skipping dinners, leaving before she wakes up, and coming back through the window late at night. May notices anyway. His bloodshot eyes, his pale skin. She asks if he's coming down with a fever. Peter lies, says it's a chem exam, scam, and he hates lying to her. He just can't explain that something ancient is living in his skull and laughing at him. He turns to the internet, old forums, strange websites, anything about cursed objects, mummified fingers, and ancient legends. He finds nothing real, just fabricated stories and internet rumors, nothing that explains the voice. In his most desperate moments, he starts wondering if it's just in his head. Maybe the mutation changed his brain chemistry. Maybe this is some kind of psychosis. He tests it. He demands out loud that whatever's inside him identify itself. And that's when the walls between them stop being theoretical. He doesn't get an answer. He gets a presence. Something dark and enormous pushing back against his thoughts, filled with quiet amusement. Peter finally understands how badly he miscalculated. At school, Ned notices that he's different. Peter freezes mid-conversation. He loses focus. He reacts to things nobody else can see. During a math test, Ned watches him grip his pencil until it snaps in half. Peter just stares at the broken pieces, realizing he doesn't feel it happen. The strength wasn't his. When Ned asks what's wrong, Peter shakes his head. He's already running the calculations of who he can tell. If he tells Tony Stark, Tony might stop seeing him as a kid who needs help. He might see him as a dangerous weapon and lock him somewhere. If he tells Ned, he puts his best friend in danger. So Peter keeps it to himself. And that isolation is exactly what Sukuna has been waiting for. You see, Sukuna is patient, and he knows how to use what he finds. He's been through thousands of years of jujutsu history. He knows how to dismantle someone. And Peter, alone in his bedroom at 4 in the morning, is the easiest target he's ever had. He starts with the small things. When Peter stops a mugger and webs him to a streetlight for the police, Sukuna points out, calmly and pleasantly, that the man will probably be released in 48 hours and hurt someone again. He tells Peter he could fix the problem forever. All Peter has to do is give him control for a few seconds. Peter refuses. He swings away. But the voice keeps talking. It moves through Peter's memories like it owns them. The voice finds Tony Stark. It creates a version of Tony looking at Peter with pure quiet disappointment. Peter sees it like a walking dream. Tony tells him that he was never ready, that he failed, that he was just a kid pretending. By then, Peter's defenses have been wearing thin for weeks. The insomnia has cost him. The isolation has cost him. The constant hum has cost him. He's been fighting to hold something back every hour of every day, and there's less of him left to do the fighting with each morning. So when Sukuna finally turns to Aunt May, Peter doesn't have the walls to stop it. Peter sits in the dark of his bedroom, hands shaking, knowing he's losing a war that nobody else can see. Sukuna has taken everything that matters to him and turned it into a weapon. The spider sense, May, Ned, Tony, everything he loves has become a way in, and he can't keep running from the thing inside of him. That's what Sukuna wants. For Peter to keep hiding, keep losing sleep, keep shrinking. If he doesn't figure out what he's actually carrying, it's going to take him apart piece by piece from the inside, so he has to understand it. Peter makes a decision, alone at 5 in the morning, sitting on the roof of his apartment building in the dark. He's been treating the energy inside of him like a disease, like something to lock away and never look at, and it's been destroying him, because you can't fight something you refuse to acknowledge. He doesn't want to understand it because he thinks it will help him. He wants to understand it because he's terrified of what happens if he doesn't. So he starts carefully, just paying attention. During a street patrol, he watches a dark aura that flickers around his fist when his emotion spikes. He notices that Sukuna doesn't rush to exploit it. He just watches. Like Sukuna is curious too. Peter starts cataloging what he feels, what the energy responds to, what makes it spike, and what makes it settle. He doesn't tell Sukuna what he's doing. He doesn't need to. Sukuna already knows. What Sukuna doesn't expect is that Peter keeping his eyes open changes the balance between them. A threat that you're actively watching doesn't have the same power as one that you're hiding from. Peter isn't beating Sukuna. He's not even close. But for the first time since the docks, he stops purely reacting. Peter starts paying attention. And somewhere in the city, a massive burst of uncontrolled cursed energy shows up. It's carrying Sukuna's unmistakable signature, but we'll get to that soon. Consuming the finger forces Peter's body to adapt to cursed energy over time. The invisible world that exists alongside the normal one begins coming into focus. Gross spirits cling to subway ceilings. Things start crawling over bridges in the dark. Peter can see them now. He's not sure if it's better or worse. His guilt and grief turn out to be a massive reservoir for cursed energy. His anxiety over the people he loves dying, like Aunt May and Ned, and his fear of failing Tony Stark. All of it feeds the power. The problem is that having energy doesn't mean knowing how to use it. He tests it during a street-level fight with the local gang using salvaged Chitauri weapons. He throws a punch. His grief briefly manifests as a dark aura around his fist. The impact sends a mercenary through a solid brick wall. He can channel the anxiety into physical force, but the output is completely unstable. The defensive applications he discovers by accident. Spider Sense gives him warning before an impact lands. Over time, he learns to direct cursed energy towards the threatened area almost automatically. If someone swings a metal pipe at his ribs, his instincts push a surge of energy into that specific spot right before contact. It doesn't make him invulnerable, but he starts surviving encounters that should break his bones. He's still completely alone with this. He still has no language for what's happening to him, no framework, no idea that there's people in the world who've been dealing with exactly this for their entire lives. That changes one night on a rainy rooftop in Queens. He spots a tall man standing near the edge of the building, wearing a blindfold, as if standing 6 stories above the street in the rain is completely ordinary. The moment Peter sees him, his spider sense doesn't strike. It floods. Every warning system he has fires simultaneously. This man is more dangerous than anyone Peter has ever been in the same room with. The tall man removes his blindfold. He uses his 6 eyes to examine Peter for a long moment. Then something shifts in his expression. Gojo throws an earpiece to Peter. Peter catches it and puts it in his ear. "Can you hear this?" Gojo asks. Peter responds yes, nervous and afraid. The earpiece is an auto-translator. No matter what language someone speaks, if you're wearing this earpiece, it auto-translates to your core language. "You're holding him," the man says. "It's not not a question. Peter keeps his distance. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. The man tilts his head slightly. You've known for weeks. You just don't know what you're holding. Gojo explains it in pieces, and Peter's reaction breaks it apart before he can finish. He starts with cursed energy, negative emotion accumulating in the world and taking physical form. Peter's face goes through something complicated, because that description makes perfect sense. Gojo explains cursed objects. Objects saturated with cursed energy from someone powerful enough that the energy persists after death. Peter interrupts. The finger. He's already putting it together. Gojo nods. Then he says a name. Ryumin Sukuna, a sorcerer who lived over 1,000 years ago. The most powerful cursed spirit in recorded history. 20 fingers. 20 cursed objects scattered across the world. And Peter only has 5% of his power. Peter sits down on the edge of the rooftop. He pulls his mask off. At this point, he's still a naive kid. He stares at his hands for a long moment. Gojo tells Peter about Yuji, a teenager who was forced into the same vessel role, who survived it because he refused to let Sukuna own what he did, who kept choosing, every single day, to remain himself. Then, Gojo offers to help. Over the following weeks, Gojo makes trips to New York and trains Peter in abandoned buildings around the city. He teaches him that cursed energy isn't just about output, it's about precision. Peter can't rely on his emotions flooding the system. He has to learn to focus and direct the energy, or it'll keep directing him. During one training session, Peter tries to hit Gojo's infinity. He focuses everything, his frustration, his exhaustion, his specific fear about Tony Stark, and watches Gojo's movements, waiting for the exact alignment of energy and timing. For a split second, everything lines up. A flash of black lightning explodes from Peter's fist. The shockwave shakes the entire warehouse. Peter steps back and stares at his hand, genuinely confused. Gojo smiles, because he understands something Peter doesn't yet. Peter isn't just a vessel. He has an extraordinary talent for this. Peter learns to apply cursed energy to his web shooters. The webs become strong enough to hold cursed spirits. For the first time since the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Peter can fight both the visible threats in a city and the invisible ones crawling through the dark spaces between them. The midpoint of the story isn't a battle. It's this moment on a rooftop in the rain, when Peter stops reacting and starts taking charge. The years between that rooftop and the events of Infinity War don't pass cleanly. They pass the way difficult things do, in increments, with setbacks, with nights that are better than the one before, and nights that are much worse. One specific night, about 2 years after Gojo's first visit, Peter is sitting on a fire escape in the rain after a patrol that went badly. He's got a cracked rib that's already starting to heal. He's thinking about May. He's thinking about MJ. He's thinking about a civilian he got to in time and one he didn't. Inside his head, Sukuna is quiet, still watching. Peter realizes, sitting there in the rain, that him and Sukuna have been learning each other for 2 years. He knows the shape of Sukuna's patience. He knows the way the presence at the back of his skull changes when Sukuna is genuinely interested versus simply waiting. He knows the difference between a probe and an attack. And Sukuna, for all his contempt for Peter's choices, has learned that this vessel does not break the way he expected. They've reached kind of a standoff. It's not really peace, but it's something they both understand. Peter is managing it well when the Black Order drops into New York and the world becomes something completely different. The events of Infinity War pull Peter into a battle at a scale he's never operated at before. He joins Tony Stark and Doctor Strange. He ends up on the ship, and for Sukuna, who has spent years slowly mapping the geography of Peter's relationships and fears, this is a nightmare of a different kind. The ship is pulling him off Earth, away from the remaining fingers that can restore his full power, away from everything he understands. He's being carried across the universe inside a teenager, and he can't do anything about it. His fury is almost physical inside Peter's head. But when they arrive on Titan, and Sukuna finally sees Thanos, really sees him, not through a screen, the fury shifts into something else. Thanos isn't a normal opponent. He's someone who has built his entire existence around the acquisition of absolute power. He believes his strength gives him the right to determine the fate of every living thing. Sukuna recognizes that immediately. He sees a conqueror, an equal, and after years trapped inside a teenager who stops muggers and worries about his aunt, finally something interesting. The Battle of Titan begins. Peter uses everything he's learned, his enhanced speed, spider sense, cursed energy reinforcement, and cursed energy enhanced webbing to slow Thanos down. For a moment, he's actually contributing, but Thanos has been fighting for thousands of years. He adapts faster than Peter can adjust. While this is happening, Tony is staring at Peter, shocked at his new powers. Thanos catches Peter mid-swing, slams him into the ground hard enough to crack the surface under him, and starts punching him. Every hit fades Peter's vision a little more. His thoughts slow down, and the control he spent years building starts developing cracks. Peter's connection to Sukuna has always run on willpower. As long as Peter is focused, he can keep the King of Curses locked away, but his body is getting beaten beyond what it can quickly compensate for, and his mind is exhausting itself trying to maintain everything at once. The defenses are weakening. Sukuna notices. After years of watching and waiting, he finds the opening. Peter's body stops moving like its own. The suit stretches as the muscles tense and expand. Dark markings spread across his skin. The familiar tattoos of Sukuna appear across his face and arms. The extra eyes open. Tony and the others immediately understand something is wrong. The body is Peter's, but nothing else is. Thanos looks across the battlefield and sees something completely different from the teenager he was just beating down. Sukuna doesn't waste time. He uses Peter's speed to move around the Power Stone blasts and close the distance. He raises 2 fingers. Dismantle. An invisible slash cuts through the air and strikes Thanos directly. A deep cut opens across his chest. This isn't strength-based. It's a technique Thanos has never encountered. He doesn't have a framework for it. Sukuna follows immediately with Cleave, placing his hand against the arm holding the Infinity Gauntlet and attempting to cut through the armor, all to separate the gauntlet from its owner. Thanos reacts instantly with the Reality Stone. The ground beneath Sukuna loses its solid form, destroying his balance and breaking the attack. Before Sukuna can recover, the Power Stone punch sends him through the wreckage of the destroyed spaceship. Most people would be done. Sukuna stands back up and wipes the blood from his face. He starts to prepare domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. He doesn't care who gets caught inside of it. Iron Man, Doctor Strange, the Guardians. None of it matters. He wants to prove his power against someone who can actually receive it. He wants to see if Thanos is actually interesting. And then Peter stops him. Not from outside, from inside. Remember, this is only 5% Sukuna. From somewhere deep in his own exhausted, half-conscious mind, Peter sees what Sukuna is about to do. He knows what happens inside his domain. Everyone around them will die. Tony, Strange, everyone. And that thought, Tony, is enough. Peter fights. He forces his way forward against Sukuna's control from the inside, pushing back against the technique before Sukuna can complete it. Sukuna fights to hold him down. Peter refuses. Slowly, degree by degree, the tattoos start fading. The extra eyes close. Sukuna is pushed back into his cage. Peter falls to the ground, barely conscious, coughing blood. Thanos looks at him in confusion. The terrifying presence is simply gone, replaced by the same battered teenager from before. It doesn't change the outcome. The heroes lose. The final stone goes to Thanos. The snap happens. Peter watches his body turn to dust. In his mind, Sukuna also disappears. Then, when Peter comes back during Endgame, Sukuna comes back with him. And now he's more furious than he has ever been in his existence. We move forward to No Way Home, and this is the moment Sukuna has been waiting for. Peter is about to face the worst night of his life, and he's been wearing down for years. Sukuna learned something back on Titan. The only thing that can stop him from taking over completely is Peter's concentrated willpower. When Peter is at full capacity, the cage holds perfectly. When Peter is injured, exhausted, or emotionally overwhelmed, the cage develops gaps. The closest Sukuna ever came to freedom before Titan was Peter's worst nights of insomnia in the early days. On Titan, it was physical damage that opened the gap. Then, in Far From Home, when Peter was fighting Mysterio, Sukuna almost came out. After all of that, Peter still woke up in cold sweats after the battle, sometimes seeing Sukuna's domain half constructed in his mind before he could force it back down. The memory of what almost happened, everyone dying inside Malevolent Shrine, Tony and Strange included, was the most terrifying thing he's experienced in years. And he carries this into No Way Home. It sits in the back of his mind as he works on the cure for the villains, as he hides them in Happy's apartment, as he tries, stubbornly, and completely in the face of common sense, to save people who have hurt so many others. Sukuna finds Peter's plan pathetic. He says so regularly. He doesn't understand mercy as a concept. Weakness should be punished, not forgiven. He repeats this every time Peter considers how to approach Norman Osborn. Peter ignores him. Then, the Green Goblin surfaces, and the building fight becomes brutal fast. The Green Goblin is stronger than Peter is ready for. He throws Peter through floors, through walls. He laughs. He attacks again and again, specifically targeting the belief that mercy is strength, trying to prove it's nothing but a failure mode. Inside Peter's mind, Sukuna watches the whole thing. He enjoys it. He keeps pointing out that this is what happens when you try to save monsters. Then, the pumpkin bomb happens. May catches a blast. Peter gets her out. He helps her stand. For a moment, one genuinely awful moment, he thinks she's going to be okay. But she's not. She looks at him, and she says a line that has guided every version of Spider-Man. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. And then she closes her eyes. Everything inside Peter breaks. In the OG story, Peter's grief turns outward immediately, into anger, into revenge, into the need to make Norman pay. He's still himself in that grief. He's still in control of himself. This time is different, because Peter hasn't just lost May. He's been fighting Sukuna for years. Every time he felt rage, he had to force it down before Sukuna could use it as a door. Every time he felt hopeless, like when Tony Stark died, he had to push it away. He has been managing his own psychology as a tactical necessity for years, and now, the person he loves most is dead in his arms on a cold floor, and he has nothing left to manage it with. Sukuna has been getting stronger too. As Peter's connection to cursed energy deepened, so did Sukuna's connection to him. The cage is older now. It's had stress fractures developing for years in the moments Peter couldn't see. Peter looks up and thinks about the Green Goblin. One unguarded human exhausted moment, he doesn't want to cure him. He wants to make him suffer. He wants revenge. That single thought is enough. The walls come down. Peter's hands slip away from May's. He stands up slowly. Dark markings spread across his face and neck. Black tattoos cover his skin. The extra eyes open. Sukuna looks out at the rain. He stretches Peter's arms and feels the air against his skin. After years of fighting through the cage, he can finally move. He looks down at May's body without guilt, without grief, seeing only the moment of weakness that finally set him free. Then he hears police sirens. He turns towards the city. For years, New York has been protected by Spider-Man, but Spider-Man isn't here anymore. The final battle at the Statue of Liberty is supposed to be about saving people. Peter's plan was simple: cure the villains, send them home, nobody has to die. But Peter's plan belongs to Peter, and Sukuna doesn't care about Peter's plan. Now it's a fight for survival. Kobe and Andrew arrive through Ned's portals, expecting to find a younger version of themselves who needs help. Instead, they find Sukuna standing on the scaffolding in a red and blue suit, the dark markings across his face, the extra eyes, the complete absence of the specific kind of tension that a nervous teenager carries in his body. They look at each other. They understand immediately that something is very wrong. Electro attacks first. Max floats above the scaffolding, pulling power from the arc reactor, electricity covering his body. Sukuna watches him for a moment, specifically watches him, the way someone watches a problem they're about to solve instantly, and then sends cursed energy directly into Electro's form. Unlike a physical attack, the energy can reach him in his electrical state. It breaks apart the energy holding his body together. Max loses control and falls from the air. Sandman is next. Flint forms a massive fist and swings it towards Sukuna. Thousands of pounds of sand compressed into a single impact. Sukuna doesn't move. He releases a series of dismantling dismantle attacks, invisible slashes cutting through the fist, sand exploding in every direction across the scaffolding. The attacks can't kill Sandman, his body always comes back together. But Sukuna spreads the sand so far, so fast, that Flint can't reform quickly enough to re-enter the fight. Toby and Andrew have seen enough. They move in together. They don't want to hurt Peter, they want to reach him. They use their experience to trap and slow Sukuna down. They call out to Peter while they fight. They remind him about MJ, about Ned. They try to give him a reason to push back from the inside. Sukuna laughs and keeps moving. Because he has access to Peter's spider sense, he feels every attack before it arrives. Every web, every punch, every trap. He knows where Toby and Andrew are going before they move. He cuts through their web lines with dismantle, forcing them to change direction mid-air. He strengthens Peter's webs with cursed energy and fires them at Toby, wrapping him and pulling him directly into a punch that sends him into the metal scaffolding. He feels Andrew coming from behind and turns at the last second, throwing him into a structural support. Both of them are hurt, but neither of them stop. In the background, MJ and Ned are watching, absolutely appalled by what Peter is doing. Everyone knows Peter is still in there. They just don't know where he went. Then, the Green Goblin arrives. Norman flies in on the glider, carrying another pumpkin bomb, laughing. He thinks he's about to fight the same teenager he beat down in the apartment. Sukuna looks up at him. He sees a man wearing a mask and calling himself a monster. He sees someone who thinks cruelty is power, who hides behind a personality he has built to justify his damage. Compared to Sukuna, the Green Goblin is a child's idea of something scary. Sukuna launches himself from the scaffolding using Peter's strength, gets directly above the glider, and activates Cleave. His hand makes contact with one of the metal wings. The metal begins splitting apart. The glider breaks. Norman crashes onto the platform. For the first time in a long time, Norman Osborn is genuinely afraid. He looks up at the figure walking towards them. Peter would be hesitating right now. Peter would be angry, conflicted, barely holding it together. Whatever is standing in front of him doesn't have any of that. Sukuna raises his hand. Deep inside the innate domain, Peter is watching. The domain is built from water and dark space and things Peter doesn't have words for. It's not a metaphor. It has texture. The water is cold against his legs where he's sitting. The darkness has weight. The mental space that Sukuna has occupied for years is not abstract. It has architecture. Peter sits in the water and watches through Sukuna's eyes as a hand rises above Norman Osborn. He's been down here before. Every time Sukuna gets close to the surface, Peter ends up somewhere in this space, fighting his way back through grief or exhaustion or rage. He knows the geography. He knows what it costs to move. Sukuna replays May's death again. He's been doing it since the moment he took control, using it to keep Peter subdued in the lowest corner of his domain. He heads Tony. He stacks the grief until the weight of it is almost physical, until Peter's will is being crushed by the accumulated mass of every loss he's ever carried. Peter thinks about May's last words. He doesn't push the grief away. He stops fighting. He accepts it, that she's gone, that he's furious and heartbroken and exhausted, that he might carry this particular wound for the rest of his life. He lets all of it be true at the same time, and then he stands up. The water around him reacts to the shift. The surface of it ripples outward from where he's standing, in every direction. The darkness at the edge of the domain pulls back slightly. Sukuna's hand freezes in the air above Norman. His arm begins to shake. From outside, Toby, Andrew, MJ, and Ned watch Peter's posture change. Sukuna throws every weight he has back into the domain. He tries to force Peter back down into the grief, back into the cold water, back into the helplessness. He pushes with years of accumulated leverage. Every memory he's touched, every wound he's reopened, every false image of Tony and May he's constructed. Peter pushes back. He doesn't have to destroy Sukuna. He never did. He just has to be there, in his own body, long enough to stop one specific thing from happening. Peter forces his way to the surface. The black markings fade from his skin. The remaining extra eyes close. Peter drops to his knees on the scaffolding, gasping, holding his chest completely spent. He's back. He takes out the cure. Toby and Andrew move towards him slowly. Peter looks up at them, exhausted, hurt, fully himself, and then looks at Norman lying on the ground. He doesn't attack him. He takes out the cure. He crosses to Norman. He injects it. The goblin persona breaks apart. Norman Osborn, frightened and confused and far from home, looks up at Peter and doesn't understand why he's still alive. Peter made a choice. He chose mercy in the exact moment Sukuna was trying to choose otherwise. He denied the King of Curses the violence he'd waited years to take. Inside the domain, Sukuna registers what just happened. He sits in the dark water and acknowledges, for the first time, that he severely underestimated this particular vessel.